You cannot separate knowledge as if you create something, a body that is managing technology transfer. It has to play the two roles, to look at what's going on abroad and as well to create knowledge internally or adapt what is created abroad to local conditions. Both of them are important. So mode of acquisition of acquiring knowledge from abroad, acquiring knowledge from elsewhere in the country, and then you have many modes of acquisition, important capital goods components, technology licenses. You know, technology licenses are by far more effective in acquiring useful knowledge, know-how, than foreign direct investment. In countries that managed to catch up, technology license represented 0.5, at some point 0.5 of their GDP, and FDA was 5%, but this 0.5 was by far more useful in the catch-up process. Copying and reverse engineering as well. This is very important. As I said earlier, 150 million patents in database. Some of them are easy to copy, but we don't look at them. Most of them are not protected in our country. And I'm proud, I mean, this time we have launched, for the first time in Morocco, in our big research program that we have launched in collaboration with UM6P, we included for applied research and technology transfer, not only research or coming from ideas within our country, but also applied research that are gonna use patents that are in the public domain or combine existing technologies to create something useful for us, right? Outside technical literature, education and training outside country, investment established by foreign direct investment, immigration of person with technology and skills as well. When there is no inflow of highly skilled people to the country, the catch-up will not happen. I will explain why later. And, but also in this inflow, we need to consider diaspora as a special case. Diaspora, it has to be leveraged for catch-up. We need to know what's going on. And UM6P as well and Maser as well, they managed to recruit many high-profile people from skilled people from abroad, from Moroccan diaspora. And I imagine it was very helpful as well, right? So modes of transfer locally, as well patent and licensing, technology consultancy services, all these are important. And the creation of knowledge, as I said earlier, it's not researchers who are creating knowledge, but also a production system is creating very useful knowledge. And we need to open up the linkages between academia and these companies to address the know-how that they're developing and the challenges that they are facing, so we can make sound R&D policy. So, as well, this, I mean, I will be using several lenses to look at the phenomenon. Now I will be using the sectoral pattern of innovation developed by an eminent called Pavitt in 1984. And according to Pavitt, it's not the same story across sectors. There are sectors where they are dominated, what we call supplier-dominated, like textile, agriculture, housing construction, services, tourism, etc. In this sector, most of the innovation is coming from suppliers. For example, services of banking. Much innovation is coming from software industry. Okay? For agriculture, most of the innovation are coming, for example, from chemical industry, developing fertilizers, pesticides, or biotech, for example, as an example mentioned earlier, biostimulants to reduce the use of pesticides. The agriculture, the farmer, what he's doing is optimizing the process using inputs from other sectors. So these are supplier, what we call supplier dominated. So it's not the same story. There are some policy implications. For example, support tech absorption, modernize via better machinery inputs, supplier upgrading, extension services, finance for new machinery. This will be more helpful for innovation than establishing R&D. I'm not downplaying the role of R&D. Of course, for agriculture, you need to, for example, find new seeds through biotechnology. But I'm talking about, like, in 100 innovations, probably 90 will come in from suppliers, from R&D in other sectors, not within the farmers developing their in-house R&D, for example. or hotels doing R&D for themselves. It's not going to happen. So we have what we call it scale intensive. Here we have automotive assembly, chemical companies like OCP, for example, steel sectors, large agro-industrial companies. Because of scale, and scale is important, so most of the innovation is driven by optimizing processes. Okay, this is one. Most of the innovation is done in-house. They might develop, for example, in automobile industry, develop research with university about corrosion, for example. It could happen. It's useful. But I'm talking about what is driving most of the innovation. And then, as well, specialized suppliers. For example, suppliers that will provide instrumentation of measure or some machines, etc. These are the specialized for manufacturing. As well, they provide innovation. It's source important. Policy implication, optimize processes, move into more complex components. We support them to move into upgrading the complexity of the product, quality standards, logistics, scale economies, etc. Specialized suppliers like aerospace parts, medical devices, instruments of measurements, like because we have researchers, for example, chromatography, for example. Well, the suppliers provide inputs to other industries to measure stuff, etc. So, and most of the innovation is product-driven. Most of the companies, as large, they are SMEs, medium companies, and policy implication because they work with these guys, probably to develop grants. So the suppliers work with the users. Like in Morocco, we are the first in Africa in producing cars. So we have the big companies like Renault and Peugeot, called now Stellantis, yes, Stellantis. And they have an ecosystem of suppliers. Unfortunately, I mean, it's good, so we are the first, but the next challenge is what? Is to develop suppliers that are domestic firms and to encourage collaboration between these suppliers within Morocco, so we establish other links beyond the cost of production. So when they will think, for example, to delocalize, they will think twice. So we need to develop this kind of grants so to keep them more and to create more value and to upgrade the complexity of what we can provide to the ecosystem. And then come to sectors, what we call it science-based, where the distance between the science and the production and innovation in this sector is narrower. Mainly, for example, pharma, biotech, electronics. Of course, R&D, public research university of utmost importance. IP as well is more important because if you don't have a strong IP here, you lose the game. Not like, for example, scale-intensive secrecy, because this process sometimes is more useful, right? And then it's not only about the sector, but also the technologies have their own rules of game. Regarding the knowledge base, for example, what kind of knowledge is needed? Is it science-heavy or hands-on, know-how? Why it matters for policy? It helps us decide whether to find labs, vocational training, or buy turnkey tech. Example, pharma needs deep science, solar PV mostly needs installation, operation skills, so we need to develop like engineering skills, et cetera, And then appropriability, how to take the benefits from the innovation. Is it IP that's playing an important role or time lead? For example, coming fast with innovation and lead the others. For example, weak IP in software, it's not important to have IP in software, but strong IP in biotech is important. The point here is to tell you, I'm not going to dwell on all of it, but to tell you, it's not one-size-fits-all policy. If we want to develop something, we need to take into consideration all these aspects. It's not only about producing, helping only R&D, right? So, as we say earlier, there are 4 capacities: create knowledge. What fails, for example, in developing systems? Underfunded science or misdirected R&D. Sometimes we need stronger R&D and we just spread resources across many users. and where other things are needed, or we establish R&D that has no user. One of the issues, for example, I said, okay, hire top talent from diaspora. But if you bring biotech talent, and then you don't have firms to absorb license, you need automatically to think about creating startups, because there will be no firms to absorb what you are creating. If you are working on nanotechnology and your system, there is no firms needing that, you need to adapt your policy according to that. For example, for the knowledge diffusion, we need to identify key diffusion challenges. Is it between supplier and producers, university, industry, etc.? Policy move, cluster platforms, supplier upgrading program, etc. Absorb knowledge, firms can't use available tech. Tacit knowledge gap. Focus on tacit capability building. We will see how we are going to do that. Policy move, vouchers for in-firm training, standards and certification support, use commercialization, no demand, for example. We have technologies, and I believe, for example, Masir at some point when they were able to develop some technologies for which we know there is a need, for example, in agriculture. I remember one problem in discussion he told me about, I think. But there is no market. Why there is no market? Because in Morocco, for example, the first investor is the state. 2/3 of investment is the state. But we are not using this public procurement as leverage for innovation to solve problem. It's business as usual. Thanks God, I mean, last year or the year before, there was some introduction of changes in the what we call the procurement code to encourage the procurement of innovation. It's important in some sectors. The first buyer, like military, in health, education, the first buyer is the state. And one of the policy moves when there is no market is to create market through public procurement. So, as I said, we agree that knowledge is important for innovation. So the most fundamental resource in modern economy is knowledge, and accordingly, the most important process is learning. In a knowledge-based economy, capacity to learn is the most critical factor for economic success of individual regions and countries. But knowledge comes in two forms, as I said earlier. Explicit knowledge, easily codified in letters, words, publications, patents. You can read it, you can watch video, you can watch a MOOC, and tacit implicit knowledge. Landval, who is prominent scholar in innovation, introduced a distinction between 4 categories of knowledge critical to innovation. The know what refers to access to information, usually explicit. MOOCs, for example, plenty of MOOCs, Coursera, edX, etc. High from the best universities in the world is accessible. The know why refers to understanding laws and principles, usually through R&D, or bring someone to train you to understand why this is happening. But the most critical, very critical to innovation are the know-how, refers to experience-based knowledge, tacit, learned through doing, using, and interacting with the people who have this knowledge. This is why I say diaspora, or inward mobility of highly skilled consultants is really important, because if you want to learn how to swim fast, you need to have a coach to swim. You can watch videos, but you are not going. You need to jump into the swimming pool. This is the learning by doing. And if you have a coach who knows how to coach you, this is the learning by interacting. It's the same story in innovation. And the know-how, the social capital. Do we have internal social capital, trust issues, etc. within the country, but also social capital abroad to allow you to access the knowledge that I need? Know-how. Like answering this serve, this is Rafael Nadal. You need to train your brain and your muscle to coordinate to answer a serve. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a training process and learning by doing and using the racquetball, right? But the challenges in innovation is not about only individual training. It's how we can coordinate all that as a team to produce new knowledge and to use it for commercial purposes. I'll give you just one illustration. Who has more know-how? This is the Inuit making food production. home construction, transportation system. And this guy, he's wearing glasses. He has no clue how to produce them. Headphone has no clue how to produce them. Using computer has no clue. And if you put this guy in the Arctic, he will die, either freezing to death or by hunger, or both, in a way. There is no way we can say this guy has more, or the other guy has more know-how, but we know this guy, the society to which he's belonging, has more know-how than the society to which the other guy belongs, because they are producing many products and they coordinate all their know-how to produce complex goods. One issue, because it's not only about hardware, there is something called software skills, but also culture and values. This is the word map of trust. Innovation requires collaboration within the firm and beyond the firm, within the university and beyond the university. And usually overlooked, the values within the society, how can we work with that? If there are some issues, how can we, okay, there is lack of trust, but how can we, within the society, build progressively trust between firm and university? We need to have it in our mind. We are not going to change it overnight, but there are things that need to be done and need to be taken into consideration. Culture. Usually we say, oh, we don't have the mindset for this, and they will have the mindset. What is it? What is it? Here, for example, I'm using HealthAfrik indicators. He's a Dutch guy who was working with IBM. And IBM developed some tools for human resources, assessment, etc., and didn't work because it's a multinational company. And from there, they decided to do studies across cultures, across countries. And he managed to come with the 6 dimensions of what you call culture within organization. It's power distance. Are we comfortable with hierarchy, with inequality or not? To what extent in the society? Individualism, motivation towards achievement and success. Is it important to have social status, or what is important is to have balance between life, work, etc., and enjoy life? Uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. And you can imagine easily these dimensions have an impact. How are we going to design innovation? In society where individualism is high, we can expect some startups, hero, entrepreneurs celebrated, like in US, UK. But in Japan, in Korea, collectivism is higher, so you have big conglomerates. You don't have many startups, but you have big conglomerates. The mindset is set for this kind of innovation. Of course, if you have long-term orientation versus short-term, the way you are going to approach the industrial is not the same. You start in short-term, you have to start with short-term. It's not, you are not going to tell them, okay, you know, we need to hire some PhD degree next November and wait for 3 years, and inshallah, we will come out to something. No, we can tell you, you know, you have a problem. I will look, for example, in the patent database and see what we can do, reverse engineering, licensing. And at the same time, I have an organization and people to whom I'm starting to build skills on how to do licensing. They don't need to wait until we come up with something. And probably in 6-12 months, we will find something for you, okay? So this is modelization of tech transfer. So there is many, many things. It's in French, sorry, but that need to be taken care of, the whole process. So you need a lot of skills. What we call back office skills, like scanning firm needs, scanning scientific database, patents, scanning building networks, scanning emerging trends, scanning ways to find. These are the back office. And then the front office, assessment of technological needs of enterprise, organizational or the technology forecasting, benchmarking, decision criteria, acquisition, help them how to acquire knowledge, etc., exploitation, and then protection of what you came up. All these skills are not going to be built overnight, but we need to have to appropriate. When we are building skills for innovation, there are several levels. The first level, what we call it, understand concepts. This is what I'm doing. I'm just explaining some concept in this presentation. But then we need the second level, we need to apply this and then to embed it within our routines. It takes time. And the design of the learning objectives, the learning methods, it differs when we move from one layer to another. For example, in innovation, there are 4 stages. There are stages where we call it unconscious incompetence. People, they don't know what they don't know. So at this level, you need to make them aware of what they are missing first. Then to develop this hunger for knowledge, so conscious, aware of skills deficiencies. Then move them to competence and conscious competence. So they are embedding, practicing, to reach the level of unconscious competence, like we are driving our cars after 2-3 years. You don't even think how you drive your car. You are just thinking about it and driving the car. This is what we call it unconscious and competence. It's second nature. And then there are several modes of learning, self-directed, in practice and about the practice. What I'm doing is telling you about the practice. In practice, it has to be hands-on. There is self-direct aspect of in practice, but the most useful is directed in practice. While you are doing the licensing, having some pilot projects to do that. Okay, we'll move. And I said earlier, there are 4 levels of capacity building. It's not only about the individual working for technology transfer in your university. It's about as well what is the cultures and the values and the skill of working as a team. Is the organization allowing for the right culture and an enabling environment for learning? And then you need to interact with the ecosystem for lobbying, for explaining, for changing things for your settings so you can do better. This is just an example. Decision matrix balancing innovation learning activities. Real-world projects, pilots, effectiveness very high, engagement very high, but unfortunately scalability very low. It costs money, it costs resources, and adaptability of course very high. And then it depends. So at each stage, where you are, etc., you need to balance that. It's not only about seminars and conferences. Now we come to, not the last slide, but the slide before it. So again, to the National System of Innovation. And of course, as I said earlier, you have from one side, education, the research system, the other side, industrial system, large companies, SMEs, and startups, and between intermediary organizations, all these guys play an important role, and you need an infrastructure, IPR, innovation support, standard norms, and funding across all the stages, VCs, not only grants from the states, etc. The government is providing framework condition, but I would like you to focus on the demand side, because this innovation is the successful exploitation of an idea in the market. There has to be some users interested in that. Otherwise, we are talking about invention, we are talking about scientific discovery, but it's not innovation. And usually, when we think about policy instrument to promote innovation, we think about instrument that will increase the offer of the potential of innovation, but we don't think about what would increase the demand for innovation. And here comes my last slide. So this is the taxonomy of instruments. Almost all the instruments used all over the world will be one of these. Will be in one of these categories. So the first thing first, what we call it, and then we have overall orientation. Is it encouraging supply of innovation or demand for innovation? For example, fiscal incentive for R&D. In developed mature systems, there are, if a company invests in R&D, there is like fiscal rebate, and they can use, instead of paying taxes, reuse the same amount of money for further R&D. But typically this measure is not appropriate for developing country. Because if you do it in developing country where your firms have not reached the materiality level required, either is going to be misused, and then you don't have in your system who is going to control, audit whether this funds or this fiscal entity was appropriately used or not. Another measure is direct support for firm, policies for training and skills, entrepreneurial policy, technical services and advice, cluster policy, build trust, intellectual sharing information, knowledge between industry and academia, but in both directions. It's not one direction. Innovation networks, private demand for innovation. Here, it's a good measure for promoting demand. Is, for example, we can say, okay, all the hotels need to increase efficiency of energy, and this is how it's gonna happen, and we are encouraging you to adopt this technology or to come up with some standards. This automatically will create demand for innovation within your country. And of course, you have to encourage technology that is domestic. So you can come up with this, or in the building construction for isolation, for thermic insulation. All this, we can organize demand. Public procurement policy and pre-commercial, what I said earlier, pre-commercial procurement or public procurement is when we are using the public fund to drive demand for innovation, to solve some problems. Innovation index inducement prices, standardizations and standards. It is of critical importance because, for example, in Korea, they encouraged them, they gave them grants, etc. But at the same time, they put high standards. Your production has to reach this quality. Otherwise, I will remove all the subsidies, all the advantages. Why? Because they help them to sharpen the knife of competition domestically so they can win internationally. Regulation and technology foresight. This is as well largely ignored. What technologies we need to master for the next 5 years? We need to develop our technology roadmaps as developing countries. In many countries, is largely ignored. And why not to launch call for proposal, not like that, open, but targeting. I would like to master this and this technology. Can we help? We have this challenge. Please focus your efforts. And I think this is my last slide. Thank you very much.
Merci CSD, oui, de nous avoir permis de sortir de notre écosystème UM6P et de voir ce qui se passe ailleurs et quels sont les défis à relever et les pistes d'amélioration, on va dire. Écoutez, là, je vais ouvrir le Q&A. Donc, je ne sais pas si au niveau de la salle, il y a des remarques, des questions. Je ne vois pas très bien avec les lumières. Oui.
Merci. If I can take it in English. Sorry, I missed lots from the presentation. But anyway, so let me just take one specific case where it can be applicable to TTO innovation or IP protection as well. We as a researcher, when we start thinking about developing things, basically we're always facing that there is specific need, but the technological development starts from very early stage that you know it will be taking ages to get it really to industrial level. When we come to the traditional way of doing things, it says, oh, you will have to take it TERAL 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Another approach for really speeding up time is that we know that several of the technologies to solve specific problems, they are either they exist on the market or they are close to getting to the market. The fact that we understand the fundamental of those technologies, we get basically to probably improve them, and then we patent the improvement that we are doing. So we benefit from the fact that they are close to the market, and we bring the benefits so that we can boost their commercialization. Is there a mechanism at TTO or even, on the other side to bypass what we call TERAL 1, 2, 3, 4, and then adopt those improvements that are happening on the existing technologies.
Thank you, Sabra, for these very important questions. The classical way, as you pointed out, is to start identifying early stage technologies that have been developed in laboratories between TRL, technology readiness level 2, at the best cases 4. And for the university, it is important to secure them at that stage and to patent them, and then look for funding, development, co-development with industrial partners. This is the classical way. And we can work on a confidential way in our laboratories and develop in a collaboration with all the circumstances that we need with an industrial without patenting anything until we get the technology at that mature level. Then we, together or university alone, use the IP mechanism to protect it. And it is possible as well to do it within our ecosystem. And we have actually one case that is actually developing within our university in this particular case.
Thank you. Thank you, Hichem. Is there any other comment or question? Yes.
Thank you for all these presentations, very clear insights and elaborate ones sometimes. My question is to Ilyas, and if we would like to zoom on this early development stage of a startup, or even upstream, maybe the creation of innovation itself, investing in terms of investment. We know this in many situations, market failure to pull and push these, in this particular phase. What model do you propose? Would the public step in, or PPPs, or what kind of something that, at least to partially de-risk that particular phase of investment? Thank you.
Yeah. Of course, the early stage startups are the most dangerous stages. And again, what I see in the scene, for example, of VC funding, except for UM6P venture, they are not really interested in deep tech because it's very risky. Not even risky, it's uncertain for them. And there is, and usually in this situation, the public funds have to step in. But it's not only step in terms of this will enhance, let's say, the offer, the supply, but they need to step in as well for demand. And yes, there were some changes in the code des marchés publics, but I don't see who is going to take, as a boss of a public organization, take the risk to work for startups. There is a good initiative now, the only that I know about, for EdTech, because I'm close to that, I'm co-founder, and there was the creation, it was an initiative for between the CDG Invest, which is the investment arm of the CDG for startups. They have 212 founders, 2012 founders. 212
founders.
Yeah. This CDG Invest with Ministry of Digital Transformation,
yes,
and the Ministry of Education, of course. They created what they call it Digital Lab. And the Digital Lab, it will be managed in a way more flexible because their hands in the ministry were tight. They cannot deal with startups. And they launched a call for interest to which like 150 startups and non-startups answered in Morocco and globally, and they select like 20. And this month they are signing the deals with to provide solutions. And I cannot dwell a lot on that. But I think this initiative should be multiplied, learned from, and multiplied to create demand for innovation locally. This is one thing. But the other thing is we need to develop skills of team building and bring in people who are able to scale up. We are short in this kind of profile. People who could take something from nationally and bring it to the global stage. You know, to go to the market, it's like when you are meeting your family-in-law the first time. You wear your best suit. You don't wear whatever it is there. So the best suit, you have the best team. But do we have the financial resources to hire and to identify the best team to work in that? I think we need to work. It's a learning process, as I said. And so there is skills, there is demand, and there is as well uncertainty that needs to be taken care of as any complex problem which is systemic in nature.
Exactement. Merci beaucoup, Siazi. Oui, est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions au niveau de la salle? D'autres commentaires? Alors, moi, je vais en profiter juste pour revenir sur la présentation de CMNI. Bon, c'est un sujet que je connais bien, que ce soit Masser ou la Masser Valor. Juste un petit complément. Quand il a présenté les différentes startups, donc la dizaine ou la douzaine, on a l'impression que c'est facile. Il faut juste savoir que Masser existe depuis 2007, qu'on a eu toutes les difficultés du monde, on a eu beaucoup de problèmes. Je me suis identifiée à pas mal de choses qu'a cité Siazi, oui. Les erreurs de casting, des chercheurs qu'on a fait venir de la diaspora marocaine, par exemple, mais qui étaient sur des sujets purement académiques fondamentaux. On ne voyait absolument pas d'exploitation ni d'application. Ça, d'une part. Ne pas oublier que la R&D est chronophage et budgétivore. Donc, il faut beaucoup de moyens. Il faut des subventions... comment dirais-je, sur la durée, d'une part. La deep tech, tu parlais de deep tech et du risque de la deep tech. Typiquement, si je reviens à l'exemple de Moldiag, cette start-up qui est spécialisée dans le diagnostic moléculaire, à Masser, nous n'étions pas faits pour devenir producteurs de kits. Dans un écosystème favorable, une fois que la brique technologique est maîtrisée, c'est à l'industriel pharmaceutique de venir prendre le relais et d'investir et d'aller dans la production et scale-up. Malheureusement, l'écosystème à l'époque, je parle d'il y a 5 ans, n'était pas favorable. Et donc, on a dû se transformer en pleine pandémie. On s'est transformé de chercheurs, bio-ingénieurs à producteurs de kits en levant des fonds. Et bon, on apprend de tout ça. Mais voilà, c'était juste un petit complément. Je ne sais pas si tu veux compléter.
Juste un petit point très important, parce que là, on est dans l'éducation. Et donc, on revient aussi à cet aspect de formation de l'esprit entrepreneurial chez les chercheurs. Je me pense à l'UM6P, il y a quand même un écosystème très favorable à ça. Il y a quand même pas mal de programmes, pas mal d'initiatives qui permettent quand même de faire une sorte d'immersion de ces gens-là qui, à la base, ils sont plus proches du laboratoire que du monde du business. C'est très important lorsqu'on veut quand même véhiculer de la recherche vers le marché, d'avoir la compréhension du langage de notre partenaire, de comprendre son besoin, de mieux cadrer en fait la démarche. Et je pense qu'il y a un élément aussi très important dans tout ce qu'on fait. Ilyes, il a parlé d'un point très important. Notre point de démarrage, il faut qu'on le fait correctement. Aujourd'hui, lorsqu'on fait l'état de l'art, etc., il y a une bonne partie des gens qui ont omis de consulter les bases de données brevets, par exemple. Sachant que des études ils montrent qu'on parle de 70% de toute l'information technique. Bon, voilà. Donc il y a quand même une bonne, voilà, jusqu'à 80% de l'information technique, on va la retrouver dans les brevets. Et donc il est un peu quand même dommageable de louper toute une masse d'informations qui est accessible déjà gratuitement. Elle est structurée et on peut en faire beaucoup de choses. Et on ne sont pas des pays producteurs de la technologie. Donc, on a plus de chances d'aller s'appuyer sur cette masse-là pour créer de la valeur ajoutée localement avec le moindre coût en termes d'investissement en R&D. Voilà, c'est juste sur ça que je voulais...
Si vous permettez, donc, juste en relation avec ce qui a été mentionné par Si Abdelhak et la question aussi de Si Abdelghafour, et ce qui a été aussi mentionné dans la présentation de Ilyes, on en a discuté largement, moi, ici, Ilyes, c'est justement d'exploiter les bases de données de brevets, où il y a 80% selon une étude de l'Office européen des brevets, de l'information technique existe dans ces bases de données, à commencer par une expérience pilote. On a discuté, mais c'est Elias, à détecter, par exemple, si on prend ce qui a été discuté tout à l'heure avant nous dans ce panel, le secteur de l'énergie renouvelable, de l'hydrogène, de stockage, etc. Et de voir ce qui a été déjà développé à un stade au niveau de ces bases de données, à partir de là. Et puis, partir de là pour développer et améliorer et faire ces improvements en matière de technologie, donc développer à 100% ici au Maroc, mais en se basant sur ce qui a été déjà avancé et développé. Et voire même exploiter ce qui n'est pas protégé ici au Maroc au niveau local.
Je veux juste illustrer mes propos avec un exemple concret. Si tu te rappelles la formation que nous avons organisée avec Frédéric Caillot. Au fait, on a organisé plusieurs formations, y compris liées à la licence, etc. Comment interpréter les datas des brevets. Et ce monsieur, il était le chargé du licensing à L'Oréal. C'est-à-dire, L'Oréal, il faisait annuellement, il était le directeur, il faisait annuellement 100 à 150 licences technologiques de Parlement, en plus de ces 2000 chercheurs qui sont in-house. D'accord ? Et il nous a parlé d'une technologie qui était super intéressante, mais qui n'a jamais été utilisée. Maintenant, elle est dans le domaine public. Cette technologie, c'est quoi? Au fait, c'est un chercheur qui s'est inspiré d'une solution pour faire croître les plantes dans l'espace en envoyant des rayons lumineux très spécifiques de point de vue nanomètre, le wavelength. Okay? Et il l'a appliqué pour les cellules dermiques. Et il a développé un appareil qui dépasse l'impact de toutes les crèmes de L'Oréal depuis sa création jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Mais L'Oréal n'a jamais lancé. Ils ont fait tous les tests cliniques. Les brevets sont là. Tout est validé. Parce que ça va faire de la phagocytose. Ça porte atteinte au business. Oui, c'est son business qu'il va tirer. Et ce n'est pas seulement une seule. Parce que L'Oréal, dans la prise de décision, c'est qu'il ne va jamais adopter une technologie pour laquelle le marché est inférieur à 50 millions de dollars. Bah oui. Est-ce qu'on ne peut pas avoir des startups, des CMIs? Est-ce que ce n'est pas intéressant d'avoir des startups qui ont des marchés de 20, 30, 40? Cherchez dans L'Oréal, dans les bases de données de brevets de L'Oréal. Un autre que j'ai rencontré en Inde, ils ont développé l'hydrogel pour les sols arides. Et c'est une technologie qui est développée un peu partout. Mais pourquoi ça m'intéressait de l'Inde? Parce qu'à l'Inde, ils sont comme nous. Chez nous, les entrepreneurs, ils sont drivés par la réduction du coût et pas par l'augmentation de la performance. Et en Inde, il y a une pression sur le coût. L'agriculteur, il ne va pas utiliser l'hydrogel s'il n'est pas. Le traitement à l'hectare n'est pas rentable. Et souvent, nous, chercheurs, ils adoptent une mentalité « ouais, c'est plus performant, etc. » Non, on doit, en tant que pays en voie de développement, c'est plus intéressant de développer ce qu'on appelle « pro-poor innovation » que « pro-wealthy innovation ». D'accord? Donc, c'est deux...
Merci beaucoup. Merci, M. Azioui. Pour conclure... Ouais.
Ah, les écouvillons. Oui, effectivement. Et il y a un autre exemple, puisqu'on parlait des Covid. Au fait, le centre de plasturgie, qui est l'association L'A.G.E.N.D.A Casa.
Il nous avait sollicité pour les écouvillons pendant le Covid.
Pour les écouvillons, au fait, après le Covid, je les ai rencontrés parce qu'ils assistaient aux formations qu'on organisait. Et une formation qu'on organisait sur l'utilisation des bases de données de brevets. eux, parce qu'ils travaillent dans l'industrie, ils ont vite vu l'opportunité. Et ils proposaient, parce que c'est une association faite par les industriels, et donc ils ont tout le savoir-faire, ils connaissent le marché, les règlements, etc. Ils ont proposé plusieurs projets aux industriels à partir des bases de données de brevets, parce qu'ils maîtrisent très bien profondément. Mais ce qui m'intéressait le plus, c'est qu'ils m'ont dit, c'est grâce à la formation que tu nous as organisée et l'outil que tu nous as recommandé de faire, ils étaient, au moment du Covid, on n'avait pas une pénurie des écouvillons, on fait le test PCR. Et ils ont combiné 2 brevets, et puisqu'ils connaissent le tissu, ils connaissaient celui qui avait la machine pour ça, et grâce à ça qu'on a développé l'écouvillon. Je dis merci, je ne savais pas que j'ai contribué à ça.
Mais et donc, voilà. C'est des écouvillons 100% marocains.
Ah oui.
Bah, très bien. Bravo. Oui. Exact. Dans le domaine public. Parfait. Bah, écoutez, s'il n'y a plus de questions au niveau de la salle, on va clôturer ce panel. Merci infiniment pour vos contributions, vos brillantes contributions. Merci à vous tous pour votre attention. Et merci à notre président de séance, Sibou Chaïb.